Hello, welcome back to Every Chess Tactic Explained. My name is Fiona Steil-Antony, and today we're going to be looking at discoveries, also called discovered attacks. And let's jump straight into it. Today we're going to take a game from the start. We haven't really done this before, but it is to show you guys that discovered attacks can happen straight out of the opening, so you always have to keep an eye out for them at every stage of the game. We see white here attacks our g7 pawn with the queen, so black played g6 to defend the pawn, and now white played knight to f3. Knight to f3 seems like a normal developing move at first, but it is already a losing mistake, and the reason why is that black has this move d5, and now we understand the name of the tactic, discovering the bishop from c8, which is attacking the queen on g4, and at the same time we're also attacking the bishop on c4. So both white pieces are attacked, the bishop on c4 as well as the queen on g4, and white is helpless. He's going to lose a piece and get a losing position straight out of the opening. So in this first example, as we can see, things have already gone slightly wrong for white. The king is all the way out on g3, but white is trying now to create an escape square for the king and plays h3. And can you now take a second and try and find the winning fourth sequence here for black? So the move is first of all starting with h4, check, checking the king. The king has no other choice. The knight is covering both escape squares. The f4 square is covered by the queen. So white has to capture the knight on g4. And in this spot, we see once again this move from the previous example, d5, check, unleashing the bishop from c8. One thing to note about discovered attacks, when they come with a check, it's called a discovered check, but in this case, it's not only a discovered check, but a discovered checkmate, because the king on g4 is out of squares, he has nowhere to go, and that d5 move, discovering the bishop, just ended the game on the spot on move 10. So in this next example, we are looking at a high-level, top-level game played between Sergei Karyakin on the white side against Levon Aronian at the Tata Steel Chess Tournament a couple of years ago. We've already mentioned that discovery attacks can be lethal from the opening, and we're going to see that with this example. So the players play an Italian opening, nothing out of the ordinary so far. Both players are just making developing moves. Black takes the center with d5. Some pieces come off the board. White plays rook to e1. Black plays the bishop to e6, c3, bishop b6. White also retreats the bishop to b3. And now black plays the move f6. And f6 is a big blunder, so even on super GM level, these blunders can happen straight out of the opening. And you can now take a second to pause your video and try and find how Sergei Karyakin could have punished this move by black. I'm gonna tell you something, the move f6, it went unpunished in the game, so try and see if you can do better than Sergei Karyakin. So the move in this position that was missed by Sergei Karyakin is c4, attacking the knight on d5. The knight has to move, and once it moves anywhere, in this case, for example, to b4, the discovered attack is the move c5, hitting both the bishop on b6 as well as the bishop on e6. And the problem is black cannot save both bishops. The best he can try to do is to exchange the bishop on b3, but the problem is that the response queen takes b3 comes with a check against the king, and after the king moves, the bishop on b6 falls, and Levon Aronian could have resigned on the spot. Instead, what happened in the game is after f6, Sergei Karyakin played d4, missing the discovered opportunity and going on to just get an equal position after bishop f7. So as you can see, even on the top level, discovered attacks are everywhere and can easily be missed. So do always keep an eye out for the pieces that can be unleashed with moves like c4 instead of d4 and looking down at this diagonal. In this next example, we're looking at a game between Grandmasters Anatoly Weiser on the white side playing against Pia Kramling, one of the world's leading women players, and it is white to play. So once again, take a second to see if you can find the sequence here. One little tip: the solution is not queen to f7, which looks at first sight like it could be made, but we talked about the pin already in a previous video. So remember, the queen from e6 cannot move at the moment because it is pinned to the king to h3. So with that in mind, can you find the other, or should I say the legal crushing solution? And that move is also linked to the square on f7, but it's not queen f7, but rook to f7 check, forcing the king to step away to g8, and now rook takes f6, discovering the queen and taking the knight. So in this case, this is a perfect example of a discovered check, and black has nothing better than to take the queen, and Pia went on to lose this ending here, which is hopeless as she's just a piece down. So in this next one, we're looking at a game between Pavel Simacek and Badur Jabava, a fantastic attacking player. We can see that on the black side, he's already sacrificed a piece. We are currently a piece down, but the king on h1 looks to be in some trouble as it has lost the defender, the pawn on g2. This is quite an advanced little tactic, so you might have to pause your video for more than just a couple of seconds here, but do try and find the solution because it is a beautiful, beautiful tactic that was found by Badur Jabava here. So the first move is queen to e6. So queen to e6 is threatening the pawn on h3. So white went ahead and defended that pawn with knight to g1. Now Badur Jabava played queen to e5, once again renewing the threat with a mate on h2. The knight went back to f3, hitting the queen and defending the h2 square. Now the queen stepped to f5, renewing the threat against h3. The knight went back to g1 to defend, and now we see what was the point of Badur's little maneuver, maneuvering the queen over to f5. He moved the queen to a square where he was looking down at the white queen on c2, which is undefended. So now he unleashed the move knight takes f2, a beautiful discovered check, forcing resignation on the spot as the queen on c2 is lost. And this last example of this video is a very special type of discovery. It is what we call the windmill. So as an introduction to this final example, which is a very famous game between Carlos Torre and Emanuel Lasker, in this position, so we are trying to set up a windmill. What is a windmill? A windmill is a combination of discovered checks where we are forcing the opponent's king to move back and forth between two squares. So with that in mind, with that little explanation, can you try and find the winning sequence here for white? So the first move is the spectacular bishop to f6, sacrificing a whole queen which is undefended on h5. So black went ahead, took the queen, and now everything is gonna revolve around this very important square on g7. So we take the pawn with the rook, the king is forced to go to the corner with h8, and now the windmill is starting. First we take the pawn on f7, and as we can see, the king, all he can ever do is step back and forth between the two squares, h8 and g8. So after the king goes back, now we take the bishop on b7. The king again has no choice, has to step back to g8. The rook gives another check on g7, and now after king h8, after we have cleaned up the 7th rank, Carlos Torre played rook g5, so discovering the bishop and attacking the queen on h5. The game continued king h7, rook takes h5, king g6. If you remember the previous video, black gets in a double attack of his own, attacking both the rook and the bishop, but the rook simply retreated to h3, and after black captured on f6, white took the pawn on h6 and went on to win the game as he's up 3 pawns. One final thing of note about this little example here is if we rewind to the position after king h8, where white played rook to g5, you might be wondering why did he not go one step further in the windmill and clean up another pawn on a7. That was also a possibility, but the reason Torre did not go for this is that if we just play out the same sequence after rook g5 and king h7, he just did not want to allow any counterplay along the a file, but he could have done this, but he chose the easier way and denying black any counterplay. So a beautiful and very famous example on the windmill. I hope you enjoyed this one, as well as the whole video series. If you have had any beautiful discovered attacks, beautiful discovered checks, or even a windmill, do let us know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video where we are going to be looking at the decoy.